Canine foster parents. Welcome to our Canine Foster Care Program Training, Module 2. Hi, Canine foster parents. Welcome to Module 2 of our Canine Foster Care Program Training. In this training, we're going to be discussing management and managing your foster dog in the home, how to set up your home to prepare to take home your foster animal and manage them in your home, the types of management, a schedule and routine, enrichment, telling them when they're getting it right, and meeting them where they are. As a reminder, we wanted to do a refresher on our rules versus recommendations. So all of our rules are going to be highlighted in blue throughout this presentation and through our other modules. These are guidelines that are in place for all animals that are placed into foster care to increase the chances of success in a foster home, as well as making sure that that foster animal, your family, the general public, and any of your resident animals remain safe. Any recommendation is going to be anything else in this presentation. These are going to be a set of standard recommendations that should be followed unless instructed otherwise. These recommendations can be tailored and will likely be tailored to increase the animal's chances of success in a foster home. So these can certainly change depending on the fostering situation.
On this slide, we're going to talk about management. What we mean by management is much of what we discussed in Module 1, arranging the dog's environment to ensure that the dog is the most likely to exhibit the behavior that we're looking for, and to limit the number of wrong choices or opportunities the dog has to practice undesirable behavior as is possible. When we do that, we also, by default, are setting the dog up to be more likely to make the right choice or exhibit the more desirable behavior that we're looking to reinforce. We certainly can't expect that any dog that's coming into our home as a foster knows any of what we expect of them or what it might even mean to live in a home. Some of these dogs have never been inside before or been in a household before. So it's our job to teach them how to do that. The most effective way that we can teach a dog in our care how we're hoping for them to behave and what the expectations are is to say yes to them as often as we possibly can. So this refers to reinforcement, positive reinforcement. So we really want to give ourselves every opportunity to reinforce desirable behavior while using the environment to manage the opportunities that the dog might have to practice undesirable behavior. If we find ourselves constantly saying no to the dog, we're not really helping them understand what it is we want them to do, which is just going to slow down the learning process and it's a much less effective way for anyone, especially dogs, to learn. We also might find that by constantly saying no, we're creating a lot of frustration and confusion, both for the dog and for ourselves. And what we're aiming to do with our foster program is to have these dogs learn to feel comfortable around people and to trust people, and to be able to build good relationships with human beings. So we really don't want to create frustration or confusion for them while they're learning. We really want to help them to learn the things that we're looking for them to be able to practice in our homes by telling them yes, by reinforcing them. In the image that you see on this slide, there's a dog that has just moved into a foster home, and you can see that some of the management tools that we've put in place here are the use of a pen. So we're limiting the space that the dog has access to within the home. We've still set her up with a nice comfy spot out of frame you can't see, but there's a door to an outdoor area for this dog to go to the bathroom. So a nice easy way to access the outdoors. We also have two other management tools in play here beyond just this pen. So we're using a blanket or a sheet hanging over the pen, and that's used to kind of control her line of sight. So she can't see things beyond that pen that could be one of two things: something really frightening or worrisome, something that could cause her to be distressed, or something that would be really exciting for her, and maybe make her want to jump up on that pen, jump up on a person, or bark or run around, or any number of things. So by controlling their line of sight, that's one more way that we can manage their environment. And then the last management tool that you'll see here, she's dragging a nice long leash, and that allows us to avoid having to physically manipulate or manage her by encroaching into her space. And that can be useful for dogs who are worried and don't want to be close to people, and we're limiting how often we're touching or physically interacting with them. But that can also be for dogs who are really rowdy and super excited by physical touch from people. And by already having their equipment on and their leash dragging, we don't create scenarios where by touching them, we're creating a situation where they're likely to jump up on us. So by having the leash dragging, by all accounts, especially at the very beginning of a dog entering our home as a foster, we are doing everything we can to limit the opportunities they have to make the quote wrong choices that will by default allow us more opportunities to tell them that they're getting it right. So as we talked about in module 1, where we talked a lot about a decompression period and giving the dog time and space to decompress, and by doing so, we're creating kind of a small world for them. This is going to talk about how we accomplish that. So we really want to limit their access to a small and manageable part of our house, at least to start. That might be where they stay the entire duration of their stay with us as a foster, or it might just be to help ease them into being a part of a more integrated part of our home and household. But it's important to limit the access that they have to the home, because it limits the number of wrong decisions that they can make. They only have to worry about this little bubble. The way that we do that is by using baby gates, closed doors, hex pens, to really confine them to a reasonably small space. We're not looking to, put them in a closet under the stairs or anything like that. But you can see in both of these pictures are examples of dogs that have a reasonable living space but are confined by pens or gates. And in those spaces, they've been pretty well puppy proofed. It's really important that we make the space that is available to the dog kind of a yes space, where it's pretty hard for them to do anything undesirable in that area. So we want to remove everything from that space that we would be upset about. If that dog chewed on or peed on or spilled their water bowl all over or pooped on it, we want to make sure that pillows and blankets that might be not dog pillows and blankets are stored away. Shoes, socks, baseball caps, anything that might look a little bit like a dog toy, remote controls, etc. We have all those things out of that space. And that anything, even if we don't care if the dog destroys it, anything that doesn't need to be in there for the dog's, well-being and comfort is not in that space, or is just put away. And then we want to fill the space with the things that they do need. So you can see in that first image on the bottom left, this dog who is not the actual true recipient of this foster space. She was just testing it out for us. The space was set up for a different dog. But the dog would have a nice comfy bed that has a nice line of sight through the door that the person taking the photo is standing in. So this dog would be able to see the family. They're in an area that is, still quiet and calm, but close enough to be a bit of a part of the action, and has a nice place to rest and be able to see that. They also have a crate to retreat to. Note that the crate doors are open, and at no point would those crate doors be shut. We would leave them open so the dog can come and go as they're comfortable. The floors are covered. What you can't see is the bottom layers of this floor covering lasagna. The bottom layers are waterproof, so they're not going to allow any waste to, ruin the actual flooring in that room. And then on top of them are a couple of fleece blankets with reusable pee pads on top. Part of the reasoning for the fleece with the pee pads on top is it provides a surface where the pee pads tend not to slip and slide all over the place as the dog moves around, especially if it's a larger dog. And then the pee pads are pretty self-explanatory. self-explanatory. If the dog has an accident, it's easy to pick that up. What's really nice about having the whole space covered in the pee pads is that if they do have an accident in one area, you don't have to take everything up and clean everything. You just pick up that one reusable pee pad, replace it with a different one, and wash the one that got messy. On the image on the right, you can see a little less of a cushioned space. This dog has still a confinement area where they have a full line of sight to all of the hustle and bustle of the kitchen area, but is able to still feel safe and secure in an area that is her own. She still has a comfy place to lay down. She has her water there. I believe there's a pee pad out of frame back there somewhere for her. But she is, close enough to the caregiver to be able to notice when she does good things, like laying at the gate calmly, where she'd be able to say, have her handler tell her that we would like to see more of that, maybe with praise or giving her a treat. So she's close enough for all of those things, but she still has her own safe space that allows us to keep her world pretty small. So there's a lot of different types of management, and all MSPCA foster dogs that go home will go home with a martingale collar on that has tags on. And this will be kept on the dog at all times while they're outside of the home. A martingale collar is one that tightens just enough that the dog can't slide their head out of it. It's not a training collar, and it's not meant to make them uncomfortable when they pull or anything along those lines. It's truly just a safety tool to ensure that when a dog is wearing their collar and has a leash attached, that they cannot back out of that collar and escape. A secondary tool would be having the leash dragging in the house throughout the transition period. We talked about this on a different slide where a dog was wearing a dragging leash. This is valuable both for rowdy dogs, but as well as fearful dogs. It avoids handlers having to do a lot of close handling and getting near the dog's collar for leash up. It also gives you a really easy and non-invasive way to gently guide your foster dog either away from things that you want to move them away from, or towards things that you need them to move towards, like a door to go outside to go to the potty. If you're noticing that they're giving signals that they might have to go, it's much easier to just pick up a leash and walk out the door than having to go get that equipment, put it on the dog, and by that point they've already had an accident indoors. Some management tools when we're outside of the home. Again, all of our foster dogs are required to be kept on a leash at all times when they're outside of the home, when they're outdoors. Even if they are in a fenced-in space, they should have a leash dragging. An additional way that we can give them access to outdoor space, especially if there isn't a securely fenced-in area, is to use a long line, and we would secure that long line to the dog's the handle end of the dog's leash, again, so that we're not having to closely handle that dog in a way that they might be uncomfortable with, or in a way that might stimulate them to be really rowdy, jumpy, maybe mouthy. Other things that we can implement as management tools, we can use crates, we can use gates, and we can use pens. I'll talk a little bit through both of these images here. The dog on the left has access to a portion of the home and is blocked into that portion of the home by this gate. I really like the gate in that image because it has a doorway in it, so you're not having to use, you can actually kind of see behind it, leaning on the wall on the left. There's a wooden tension gate where you would have to step over it or like fully pull it out of place to go through the doorway or the space the gate is blocking off. But with the gate that you see in this image that is in use, it has a handle that allows you to kind of open and walk through it, which can be really, really handy as a makeshift doorway, but that still allows the dog to have a line of sight, and even more importantly, allows you to have a line of sight to that dog to be able to notice every time they do good things like relax, sitting calmly, and be able to reinforce that behavior. The dog on the right is set up with a crate space, and you'll notice a couple of key points here. And not every dog is going to feel comfortable wanting to even enter a crate, even given free access to it. But it is a really ideal and highly recommended option to offer to any dog coming into a foster situation. And you'll notice with this crate, the door is wide open. There's a cover over it. So even though it's a wired open topped crate. By covering it up, it kind of creates a nice cozy confined area where the dog might feel more comfortable. There's plenty of comfy blankets in there, but they all look as though they don't have, filling in them or feathers or anything like that. So if the dog tears it up or rips it up, it's not too big of a deal. There's a water bowl in there, some toys, a nice chewy bone, and a puzzle toy. So things that would all encourage that dog to want to spend time in the crate space. But again, she's not confined in there. She has the option to come out, but it seems as though she wants to choose to be in there because all the good stuff is there. When we are creating our confinement spaces and we're using all of these management tools, we want to do so with intention and mindfulness about structuring the dog's day. So our dog should really not have any time or very little time where they're left to entertain themselves on their own without there having been forethought about that. So if we know we need to leave a dog alone for a period of time, which is very often the case, we're scheduling the day in a way that it provides them ample opportunity to have their physical and mental needs and stimulation needs met prior to being asked to relax or settle in a confinement area. And then when they are going to be asked to settle in that confinement space, we know we've met all of their needs and we're setting that space up to be an area where they're very likely to be able to participate in relaxing and settling in that space. So in both of these examples, you can see that, again, the dogs are set up with, an area that is relatively adjacent to the action part of the home, like all the other things that are happening, but they're still in their own little corner where they have, their pee pads and their beds and their crates and their comfy spot to relax. And then in the bottom left image, you can see this dog has plenty of things to do. She has a couple of toys. She's got a little puzzle feeder in there. And in both of those areas that these dogs should be able to rest and relax, given that their other needs are met. One key point that you can see in the right image is that on that very bottom shelf on the left, that's a little security camera. So that allows you as the caregiver to observe their behavior even when you're not there. So we've met all their needs, they've had all their exercise, they've gone to the bathroom, they've had their meal, they've had mental stimulation, attention from their handler, and now it's time to settle down. We've set their space up with everything in there to encourage them to settle down, and now it's time for them actually to settle. But if the idea is for them to settle alone and for their caregiver to move into a part of the day where they're not directly interacting with their foster dog, we want to know how all of our best laid plans worked out, and having a camera in that space can be really, really valuable. Our foster program does have a couple of cameras available that can be lent out, but they're relatively inexpensive to get off of Amazon if you wanted to have one on your for your own. So when we think about schedule and routine and trying to ensure that in a dog's confinement space, they have everything that they need to already be ready to settle, and then things to keep them busy in that space, we really want to think about enrichment and how we're meeting their needs in advance of getting them to settle, and then how we're meeting their needs in that space to ultimately settle. In our foster care library, we do have a canine enrichment section, both in the handbook and in the library, that go through a lot more detailed information about how you can provide regular enrichment. But things to consider are giving them access to just species, like behavior that is normal for their species. So sniffing, digging, foraging, barking, chewing, roughhousing and playing, being included in things that the family does. When we talked in our last module about giving them choice and opportunities to have control over what happens to them. So when they opt into a petting session or they opt out of that petting session, making sure that we're giving them that agency over what happens to them, which also helps them to feel safe in their quiet space when it's time to rest. And then having predictable routines and predictable interactions. Things that, we really want to avoid are using these confinement spaces in a way that are socially isolating. That can be very stressful for dogs. Really long periods of confinement where there isn't any enrichment. Maybe they weren't set up to succeed in that confinement space. We don't want their confinement spaces to be in areas of the home where they'd be denied access to reinforcement from their handler. We want to be, as we pointed out throughout a lot of those images, close enough to the dog with a line of sight to the dog to be able to identify when they're doing things we want them to continue doing, so we can reinforce them, giving them praise, giving them a treat. The things that they've already told us they really enjoy, that we have kind of tucked in the back of our brain as a part of getting to know them. We also want to make sure we're avoiding scary or unpredictable things in the home. So that goes back to how we've talked about keeping their world pretty small. So you can see that a lot of the things that we already talked about in Module 1 and the beginning of this module really come down to a lot of what we're talking about in this slide and how we're managing the dog's schedule, their routine, their daily setup, and their access to enrichment. It's really important too that we take all of that into consideration, that not one size is going to fit all dogs. So determining which of these tools are most valuable in our home, like our physical home setup, our lifestyle, and the specific foster dog. And that might take adjustment and flexibility, using the information we gather about whether what we've set up allowed that dog to be successful or didn't. And we might need to shift our approach or make some changes. So we want to make sure that we remain flexible. And if we are running into trouble, that we reach out to our foster coordinators or the behavior team to be able to help adjust the plan accordingly. So one thing I want to talk about here is that now that we've taken this approach of managing everything around the dog to ensure that we are setting them up to be successful and to offer us the behavior that we're looking for, we then need to know how to take that opportunity and tell them that they've gotten it right. So the things that we really want to reinforce, that we want to see more of, are calm, quiet behaviors as often as possible. And we can reinforce those in any number of ways. We'll talk about that in a minute. And that we're kind of neutrally ignoring aroused or excited behaviors, especially when the dog is, in a space where it makes sense for us to do that. They're not jumping on us or hurting anybody or themselves. But if they are, demand barking or doing something that is clearly to get our attention, we want to kind of neutrally ignore those things and calmly end that interaction to avoid them accessing reinforcement for that behavior inadvertently. It's very important that not only do we not ignore or forget about the easy behaviors, but that we really go out of our way to notice every little thing that the dog does that's good. So just calmly standing around, sitting, lying quietly, relaxing over in their own space. Those all seem like things that should be, normal and easy and natural for a dog. But in some cases, we really either need to help a dog relax, or they need to be taught how to do that in a home because they've never done that before. So we really want to make sure that every time we do capture a moment where a dog is exhibiting that calm, ideal behavior, that we're taking an opportunity to tell them, yes, that's good. Calmly praise them or offer them petting if that's something that dog likes, or we're taking that opportunity to maybe calmly pass them a little treat, and that we're only ever beginning interactions with our dogs when they're already calm or they've already politely asked for our attention. So if a dog is bouncing off the walls and we don't want to take that opportunity to go over and rile them up and say, let's go outside and play. We might want to present them with an opportunity for a chewy or something that will be a little bit more of a calm activity, so that when they come out of that calm activity, they're in a space where we can begin interacting with them and they're already relaxed, and then invite them to maybe go outside and get some of their energy out. We talked a lot in Module 1 about reading body language during the decompression period. So this is where we start to use all of that information that we collected. So we really want to pay close attention to the dog's body language and learn what he likes and what he doesn't like. We're going to use that information to inform what kind of reinforcers we're going to use. So some dogs do like food. But I think we've all either met the dog or heard of a person who has the dog that is, quote, not food motivated. And that very well may be true, but food is not the only way to engage in positive reinforcement training. So if we've spent this time learning our dog's body language and their likes and their dislikes, and we find that they really are into a certain type of squeaky toy, or they really love to be pet, or they really enjoy access to the backyard or going for a walk or sniffing that thing that's over there in front of you while you're walking, access to things around them can be really reinforcing. So we've learned that information in the decompression period, and now we're going to start really using that to build the behavior that we want. And it's going to look different for every single dog. It can also change from moment to moment with the same dog. So you might have a dog who's very willing to work for food and they're really engaged in training when you have treats, but then a dog comes into sight down the street and that totally changes what they're interested in and what they are able to find reinforcing in that moment. So we might need to shift what reinforcers we're using in those moments to something that is closer to what the dog is looking for. We really want to pay attention to both their body language and the environment, the context in which that body language is occurring, so that can inform what choices we make next for the dog. So whether that is getting distance from the dog that they see, or adjusting our level of excitement to keep the dog from having their arousal levels get overwhelming and they're now jumping and mounting. We really want to use all of the tools in our tool belt to help inform the decisions that we're going to make to help set our foster dogs up for success.
Now that we have gone through learning about body language, decompression, and managing your foster dog in the home, and also telling them when they're getting things right, it's really important that we are continuing to think about meeting them exactly where they are. So all these pictures depict things that are very useful skills, things that our adopters might want some of their dogs to know prior to taking them home. Learning how to stay into a crate. That is not a skill that a dog is going to know naturally, nor is going to the bathroom outside or walking nicely or loosely on a leash. So these are all things that we need to make sure we're meeting these dogs where they are. So not expecting them to want to be closed into the crate initially, not expecting them to go to the bathroom outside, kind of expecting them to have accidents in the house, and also not expecting them to walk perfectly on a leash. These are all things that these dogs will likely need to learn because they have not had much exposure or any exposure to at any point in time in their life. And we just need to make sure that we're starting them at a good point and making sure that we're teaching them properly and not overwhelming them when we're putting them into a foster home.